Welcome, friends, to this question and answer session. This is an open forum, which means you can ask any question on what I spoke earlier, or any question on what I did not speak about. Or you need not ask a question, you can give an answer. Or you can make a comment. For the masters, the whole creation is a surprise all the time. And it is designed to put them in a state of wonder. Surprise also sets us into a state of wonder, and this creation also gives a sense of wonder. You know what sense of wonder is, how wonderful you feel. Unless you want to get lost.
No.
Some people like to get lost.
Okay.
No. They can retain their awareness. It's a question of going from one state of awareness to another and coming back. So really you lose nothing, ever. But for some time you can have an experience that you don't have it. But if you want to keep the experience that you have it, then you just go as a visitor, a temporary visitor. Don't go as a resident. Yeah. Just in transit. Okay? Then you can not forget anything. Keep it with you. Human beings can be like animals, animals can be like human beings. If a man acts like a dog, he becomes a dog. And that will cover many men, you know. And on the other hand, if a dog has done his term and he has progressed, done his karma as a dog, he comes back as a human being. The only life in which we create karma is human life. All other lives, whether dogs or animals or birds or angels, are all lives to pay off karma, not to create. We don't create karma as a dog. We don't create karma as an angel. We don't create karma in any other life except human. But we pay off in all these. We can pay off a karma in the physical world. We can pay off our karma in a dream world. We can pay off our karma in the astral world. But we don't create there. So we call them Karam Juni, a life where you create karma, and Bhog Juni, where you pay off karma. So dog's life is a payoff. Yeah. But of course people migrate from one to the other because they're all life forms. They have the same soul. Only the level of awareness is different in different species. Plants also have the same soul that we have. Plants also are incarnation. So we move. One thing I've noticed is that when you have a multiple types of karma, that means a person has died with karma which requires he be an insect for 30 seconds, he be a snake for 6 months, he should be dog for 2 years, 3 years, he should be then a human being. If the number of lives to be gone through before you become human again, then they are in the order of ascent of consciousness, almost like Darwinian theory. When I looked at the Darwinian theory of evolution, I said it's surprisingly close to how we pass through different lives when we go through karma. So we can go from plant life, we move on to insects, animals, birds, mammals, and then human. So it doesn't happen that you suddenly have one human, then cat, then dog, then human. It's a progressive thing that you come up. And then you create more karma, then you go on another cycle. It's a cycle. The souls in Sachkhand have merged and they have the experience of separation and merger together. So Sachkhand is no problem. Bhamar Gufa is a problem. Bhamar Gufa is a problem that if a soul gets trapped there, that means the soul was with a Sadguru, not a Satguru. First of all, that from Parbrahm they descended to Bhamar Gufa and couldn't get out. Bhamar Gufa has been called the whirling cave. It's like a cave because dark. it is the origin of darkness. Bhamar Gufa creates the whole concept which creates darkness even here. So it's the origin of darkness, and therefore it's very deep dark. It's so dark that even a soul with the light of 16 suns of the physical plane is not able to go through, not able to see the other side. The other problem is you go into that Bhamar Gufa from one end and think you're moving straight, and you come out from the same place back again. So that's what's called the Bhamar Gufa. There the souls that have been trapped, when they are seeking, they find a Satguru who takes them across. But before taking them across, he brings them back to the human form and then takes them back. They give a lot of importance to the human form because they have to make him into a seeker. And although you are seeking in the Bhamar Gufa, you are not a seeker in the sense you are here in the physical form. So they bring them back. There are other souls in different levels besides Bhamar Gufa. And if they are stuck somewhere and they are seeking, the perfect living masters, in response to their seeking, bring them back to the physical form, then take them back.
Like that.
I met him a number of times.
Okay.
And I became his friend, although he was much senior to me. He was very old when he came.
Right.
Julian Johnson, as you might know, was a missionary and came to India in his missionary work in Calcutta, on the east end of India, and he was doing missionary work, converting people to Christianity. But then 2 Christians in the United States had mentioned to him Great Master's name. So he wrote to the Great Master that I have heard about you and I want to come and meet you. And I understand that you don't distinguish between Christians or Hindus or Muslims, and they all are your followers. So the Great Master said, all right, you can come, take a train from Calcutta, and the train will not stop. The non-stop express train does not stop in Beas, the Dera. So you can stop either in Jalandhar, 25 miles earlier, or stop in 25 miles later in Amritsar. So somebody will pick you up. If you come to Jalandhar, it's very easy. My attorney, who's a good satsangi also, he lives right next to the railroad station in Jalandhar. So he'll drive you the 25 miles to the Dera. So Julian Johnson arrives, and before he arrives, Great Master tells the attorney, whose name was Bhagat Singh, he tells the attorney, let's play a game. Now I am telling you this story because people think that masters are very serious-minded, people giving serious discourses. They don't realize how mischievous they can be. He told Bhagat Singh that let's play a game on this guy. He's coming from America, and so what I'll do, I'll hide in your house. I'll come beforehand and hide in your house. You go and pick up Julian Johnson at the station, railroad station. And then he say, let's go home and have some tea. He will say, no, I've not come for tea, I've come to Master, let's drive. He said, no, what's the hurry, don't be. Try to persuade him to come to the house. And he'll be a little angry with you. He'll also get a little angry with you that what is this guy thinking that tea is more important than meeting the Master. But then you bring him to the house and then you say, Dr. Julian Johnson, I have a surprise for you. And then he will come in and I'll meet him. That's exactly what happened. Then Julian Johnson landed at that station and Bhagat Singh was there to pick him up. He said, welcome, I recognize you. Not too many foreign-looking guys come. You are a tall, foreign-looking guy, so come. And he took him home. He said, we'll drive after some tea and relaxation, we'll drive. No, let's drive quickly. He said, no, we'll have some tea or some snacks. He said, no, I am not come for snacks or tea. Exactly. I have come to meet the Master. So after some time he says, well, we have a surprise for you. And he takes him inside the living room where Great Master was sitting there. He said, you are here, Master? He said, you traveled thousands of miles, I only traveled 25 miles to see you. So he sat there, he wrote a letter that very evening to his friends in the United States, saying that I have spent just maybe an hour and a half or so in the presence of the great master. And just looking at him has given me something that even if I get nothing more, I'll be satisfied. My mission was successful. So people thought he was crazy. I mean, back home. And he began to got Naam, initiation, meditation, and began to start meditation. But he would go to the great master and say, I want you to help my friends back there. My friend's wife is not well, can you help him? Say, okay, we'll ask for blessings. So and so has not been able to achieve business results. Okay, great master would say, okay, we'll help him, we'll pray for him. In the meantime, I was much younger than him, but because I was spending a lot of time around great master, so I would see him there. Then he became a friend, because not too many kids were speaking English. So I just became his friend because of the language. Then we began to talk about things, and for serious meditation, he went and dug a cave on the bluffs of the river, because he found that many sadhus and many yogis were working by meditating in the caves. And maybe it's a much better place to meditate because there's no disturbance, and you can even have a door shut. So he made a very modern kind of a cave, a good cave with a door and nice place to sit there for meditation. A couple of times I also meditated in his cave. It was called Johnson's Cave. So while going to the cave, I would walk with him and share many things. One of the things he mentioned to me was that I came to this master thinking that the master is a wish fulfillment machine. So I could put any wishes of people and get them fulfilled. Now I am realizing that the karma which we have, good and bad, is a great thing. It's a platter given to us on which we can become seekers. And I've stopped asking anything from the master. I find that bad karma is as important as good karma. Because if all our karma is good, we don't become human beings. We go to heaven. Many heavens. If all the karma is bad, we don't come as human beings, we go to hells. Many hells. It's only when you have a combination of the two that you have a chance to be in human life. All human beings have a mixture of the two. Sometimes it looks to us like some have more bad karma, some have more good karma. That's also an illusion, because the karma that is visible to us is of two kinds: the tangible things they have and the intangible things they're going through. We can see a person, a lot of money, celebrities. I met some celebrities in Hollywood, actors, big well-known actors, actresses, and on the screen they look so happy and joyful. Personal life, terrible. Misery. Now, a person watching them will say, what a good karma. He's become a celebrity. Look, he's a millionaire, millions, big mansion they live in. And when you find the intangible relationships, they suffered so much. That woman ditched me, that man ditched me, and what did I do wrong? So I'm so desperate. Depression is so strong amongst them. So if you take the tangible and intangible all into account, you find all of us are pretty well balanced in the two. It's just that some have more tangible assets and less liabilities, some have more tangible peace. Poor people, some have very big contentment. In India, in a land where Krishna was born, I went to see poor people in a state of ecstasy and happiness. Now, I'm not talking of that ecstasy which we talk of here, but it was just a joyfulness. But they did take something, because after a hard day's work, they would sit together and sing together. And in the singing, they got so excited and so happy. Happiness was writ large on their face. They were all very poor people. So here the poverty of those people is being matched by the happiness they're getting from something. On the other hand, the riches of the people is creating so many people who are rich with a lot of money are worried about money itself. A study was done in Boston recently and published where a researcher took a study of people with $10 million or more of assets or worth, money-wise, wealth-wise, to see how happy they are. And he found all of them unhappy. And he checked with one guy who had $10 million of assets that how can you be unhappy? You got all the money, you say money makes you happy. He says, I went to the university, Harvard, I got a doctoral degree there, I set up my own business, worked very hard and developed my wealth by working hard. Look at my neighbor, he went nowhere, no schooling, and he has got 20 billion worth. How can I be happy? So the man's happiness is dependent on somebody else. So these are factors which you see that they balance them out. But Julian Johnson realized this, and it was a big discovery for him. But then the more important thing is that he spent a lot of time, a few years, he was not there too long, a few years. After a few years, he decided to accompany the great master to Kashmir. And there in Srinagar, the capital of Kashmir, he wanted to get his picture taken. He said, I don't have any good picture of yours. And these little old, small Agfa and Kodak cameras did not take good pictures. I want to get a picture of the master in a studio. So the studio was run by Mr. Mehta. It was on the bank of the river. It had two parts, a studio downstairs and a store on the top. So he went from the top part and he said, I want to get a picture taken with somebody. And the great master was waiting in the car downstairs. So he said to his assistant, go and take a picture. This is an American tourist has come. And maybe he has found some good-looking girl and he wants to take a picture with that girl. Go and take a picture. So the photograph was taken. After 2 or 3 days, come and pick up your prints. When he went to the store, the man said, let me check up how the prints have come. And he saw the picture of a white bearded man. He said, you Americans are so stupid. You are taken in so easily by these. I thought you got some pretty girl's picture. Julian Johnson said, no, he is my master. And he said, look, you are in a country, there are all fake masters all around. And don't be taken in by these. You are an intelligent person. What do you do in America? He said, I am a doctor, I am a surgeon, and I have also been a missionary. But I have found this master, and I know he is a perfect master. He says, he has fooled you. He cannot be a perfect master. There are no perfect masters. They are all imposters. He said, but I can tell you this one is a perfect master. You may not believe, but anyway, let me take my pictures. He said, you are really a doctor? He said, yes. I have had a back pain for a long time, that man said. Mr. Mehta said, I have had a back pain for a long time and no doctor has been able to cure it. He said, I can treat you for that, but you have to come to my clinic. Where is the clinic? In the Dera, where the master is. Okay, I'll come for the treatment. So he went to the Dera for treatment and stayed with Dr. Julian Johnson in his own house, which was given by master. And there, every day he got treatment and felt much better. He said, you're a good doctor. I don't know, as a good doctor, you don't have the intelligence to see that these people who are called gurus and masters here, they are all fakes. This is a money-making machine. He said, but this master doesn't charge for his spiritual work. So that's not true. Ultimately, after 10 days, Mr. Mehta says, I have some questions to ask you. How are you sure he's a master? What kind of knowledge has he given you? He put a list of questions. He said, write down all your questions and I'll answer them. So he wrote all his questions And Julian Johnson said, I am going for a discourse, satsang of the Master, come along with me. So he went, he said, carry the questions with you so I can answer them on the way. So he was reading the questions and walking with him, and they reached the satsang, the discourse. So then he attended the discourse and he was surprised. Mr. Mehta, this questions are being answered by the Master. He said, Julian Johnson, I am surprised. This man with the white beard was able to answer half my question without my asking them. He said, you have to come once again tomorrow. So he went next day, he got answer to the remaining questions. Then he got initiated, he stayed there. His whole family thought that he had deserted the family. But then they all became disciples after this one man. After a few months stay there, and that's the last part of Julian Johnson's life. One day, Julian Johnson came after meeting the Master in the evening and said, Mr. Mehta, I have good news. He says, what's the good news? He says, I'm going home. He said, what, you're going back to the United States? No, I'm going back home. Don't tell me you're going to die. Well, you call it death, I don't. He says, how do you know? He said, because I've seen it. I saw that next week, another guy from the American consulate in Lahore will be coming and arguing with me about this, my following this path, and he'll have an altercation with me, and I'll be sitting on this chair, he'll be sitting here. He's telling the whole thing. He'll knock me over, my head will hit here, and I'll die. Physically I'll die, but I'll be going home. Master told me I'm going home. He said, don't scare me by such stories that you are going to die and you're giving details of it. That's exactly how he died. And Julian Johnson, that consulate man, came. Then Great Master said, don't pursue any case here. So, but he told him 7 days earlier, he told Mr. Mehta. Now, I heard from the horse's mouth all the story because Mr. Mehta happens to be my father-in-law's younger brother. So within the family we were able to hear. And I, of course, spent a lot of time with Julian Johnson. What I liked about him was that another girl came from the United States. And she was very, she was a yogi that means. She had traveled to so many places and she had written a book called The Unquenchable Flame. I don't know if anybody seen it. The Unquenchable Flame by Elizabeth Bruce. Her name was Elizabeth Bruce. And Great Master said, well, you both guys are lonely, you get married, and she became Mrs. Johnson then. So she married the dear Elizabeth Johnson. So that lady, after she married, says, I was spending time with Johnson, I went and saw her as a child. I was very surprised because she had peas, you know. What are green peas that we eat? Green peas in a jar.